Hello, hello. Welcome back to Uncanny Cold Cases. It is time to lift another historical paranormal case from the shadows and expose it to the light of modern psychology, forensic science, and our very own uncanny investigative techniques. Can we make sense of this enduring mystery? Let us see. To help us, we are joined by that dream team of supernatural sleuths. For Team Skeptic, psychologist Dr. Kieran O'Keefe, and for Team Believer, writer and parapsychologist Evelyn Hollow. It's good to have you both here. Kieran, this is a cracker of a case.
Yes, it is. When we asked people for suggestions for cold cases, this is one that kept on coming up. It is a fascinating case, and I love it for its smorgasbord of psychology and deception.
I love it, a supernatural smorgasbord. Evelyn, we've been looking at quite a few cases from the 20th century so far in the series. This one takes us right back to the 1700s, to the reign of George III.
Yeah, this is a really, really old case, but when you look at it, it's got a lot of parallels with modern cases. And there's a lot of the same phenomena happening. And so it just goes to show you that you can go back hundreds of years. I mean, you can go all the way back to Roman times and find phenomena that matches what we would now call a poltergeist. So what is causing all of this?
What indeed? Let's dive straight in, shall we? And imagine ourselves back in the winter of 1759. We are on a street called Cock Lane in the city of London, and we are standing outside number 20, home to William Kent and his girlfriend, Fanny Lyons. William is a young businessman trying to make his way in the world. Fanny is pregnant, but their relationship is complicated. William used to be married to Fanny's older sister, Elizabeth, who died in childbirth just a year ago. And Fanny and Elizabeth's family do not approve of William taking up with Fanny. So they have run away to London together, pretending to be husband and wife. Now, this is a big deal. Having a baby out of wedlock in Georgian times is a huge scandal. Their landlord knows the truth, but turns a blind eye if they pay their rent. On this particular wintry day, William is about to go on a trip. He wants to make sure that heavily pregnant Fanny is all right in his absence, so he asks their landlord, a man called Richard Parsons, whether Richard's 11-year-old daughter Betty can keep an eye on Fanny and look after her. Now, Fanny and Betty are opposites, really. Fanny is a shy, gentle soul from the country. Betty is a sparky, streetwise London kid, but they get on well. That night, the two of them are alone in the house. It is cold. This is long before central heating, and they decide to share a bed for warmth, and perhaps for company too, as the house feels just a little odd. As the pale, cold sun sets over the dome of St. Paul's Cathedral, Fanny and Betty tuck themselves under the blankets, snuff out the candle, and that is when it begins. In the shivering darkness, the house is suddenly alive with sharp, strange noises. There is scratching and scraping. The sounds seem to move around the room, and then a barrage of harsh knocks as if someone is trying to get in. Fanny and Betty pull the bedclothes tight, not against the cold now, but against what seems to be an invisible presence that wants their attention. The next morning, the sleepless pair tell Betty's mother, Mrs. Parsons, about the weird noises. She suggests it could be their neighbour, a shoemaker. Life is hard in the East End. People work long hours. But on Sunday, the scratching and knocking starts up again. And it's the Lord's Day now. No one is at work next door. The idea that this cacophony of frightening sounds could be coming from the shoemaker is frankly a load of cobblers. The scratching and knocking is back again the next night, and the night after that too. And soon, word spreads across the local community about this alleged haunting. What the hell is going on at number 20 Cock Lane? Fanny and Betty seem to be in the midst of what we would now describe as a potential poltergeist haunting. Kieran, I know that you love to look at environmental factors as a possible cause. What was this area of London like in the 1700s? Are there potential factors here that could cause a haunting?
There are a huge number. We've got to consider at this point in history, 18th century London is an incredibly polluted city. And it's partly because from a domestic level, you've got coal burning fires and very little opportunity for that smoke to escape. But also you've got lead-based industries that may be poisoning the water. And we know that lead is a neurotoxin. And also right where we are in London, you've got proximity to Smithfield Market. And you've got the potential there for meat mixing with grains, but also creating mold, which we know can have an effect.
So you think
on
all of these
people's
things
brains.
could cause potential hallucinations?
Yeah, absolutely. But not only that, you're dealing with a period in history where they wouldn't have had the same sort of plumbing that we had now, or even the concept of hygiene. So they would have been throwing human excrement out into the street as well.
So it could be a poltergeist. Evelyn, we also have to look at an area from a Team Believer point of view, of course, about the history of what's going on. If we've got ghosts, we need death. Who died in that house, in that area? You've been looking into the history of Cock Lane.
Yeah, I have. So nearby, we're talking about Smithfield Market, as well as selling meat. It was once a major and oldest execution site in all of London. In fact, martyrs were burned here under Mary I, so it's not just regular hangings, it's really violent, horrendous death.
Bloody hell, Bloody Mary.
Nice. William Wallace was infamously hung, drawn and quartered here. Also, Cock Lane is next to a massive burial pit for plague victims. In fact, there are 50,000 corpses buried here nearby. So if you're looking for death, Cock Lane has it in abundance.
All right, thank you both. Good thoughts. I would love to hear all of your theories on this case as well as we dive further into it. Are you Team Believer or Team Skeptic? You can put your thoughts and theories in the comments below, but keep an open mind here because things are about to get even more interesting on Cock Lane because the locals are starting to have their own ideas on who or what this ghost is. William and Fanny's complicated love life has become a big source of gossip in the area. Malicious rumours are spreading that the noisy spirit is actually William's first wife, Fanny's sister, Elizabeth, come back from the grave to point the finger of shame at William and Fanny, living in sin, expecting a child out of wedlock. William is worried. He's got a stressed-out, pregnant girlfriend and the Lyons family on his tail. Fanny is worried too, but for a different reason. She has her own theory on the haunting. She has convinced herself that the scratching and banging has an ominous message for her, that she is going to die. To top it all off, William and their landlord, Richard Parsons, have had a massive bust-up over an unpaid loan. Richard borrowed £20 from William. That is close to a year's wages at the time. William wants it back. It is all kicking off in this house in Georgian London. So Fanny and William decide they do not want to spend another moment there. They move out of number 20 Cock Lane and rent rooms nearby above a jeweller. The banging and scratchings don't follow them there. Is the haunting over? Or is there a sting in the tail here? Because horribly, within just a few weeks, Fanny's fatalistic theory has seemingly been proved right when 8 months pregnant, she dies of smallpox. This is intense, right? And whatever is going on here, it seems to lead to a resurgence in the activity at number 20. The noises are back. And there is something else now too, because up till now, it has only been sounds. But one day, Richard Parsons, the owner of number 20, William and Fanny's former landlord, has a friend over. And this friend sees what he describes as a ghastly white figure walking up the stairs, shining with an unearthly glow. We have potentially paranormal noises here, and now we have a potential apparition. So Richard Parsons decides that he needs help. It comes in the form of John Moore, a Methodist preacher, rector of the nearby church of St. Bartholomew the Great. Moore has a theory that this fresh wave of knockings is actually Fanny herself, hurt and furious about William's remarriage. Interestingly, the noises seem to happen mostly when Richard Parsons' daughter Betty is around. Remember, she was present in bed with Fanny back when all this started. They had that friendship, that connection. Could it be that Fanny is trying to make contact with Betty to pass on a message? It is quite a theory, and John Moore has an idea of how to try and prove it. He suggests a way to interrogate the ghost, asking it for replies. 1 knock for yes, 2 for no. So they huddled together one night in the flickering candlelight of number 20. John Moore, Richard Parsons, Mrs. Parsons, Betty, and a few others to begin their seance. Moore asks questions, and the knocks start to come through. And the ghost's replies are explosive. Fanny Lyons did not die of smallpox, the knocks claim. She was poisoned. What's more, the ghost names the person responsible for this terrible crime: William Kent. Now, William hears about the accusations. Outraged, he confronts John Moore, who suggests the best way for William to clear his name is to come to a seance and speak to the spirit himself. And so, in January 1762, on another ice-cold night, witnesses gather for another seance. And after 10 minutes or so, the spirit makes its presence known again. And if this really is the ghost of Fanny Lyons, she does not hold back. Did you die naturally? Moore asks. No. Were you poisoned? Yes. Did any person other than Mr. Kent administer it? No. Shaken, stunned, William asks the ghost if he should be hanged. The answer is an unambiguous yes. Bloody hell, William Kent. Holy crap, Fanny. Evelyn, this is sensational, isn't it? Have you ever heard before of a ghost accuse somebody of murder?
Only once. So in 1897 in West Virginia, USA, a young woman died and it was said to have been from heart failure, but then her mother saw a ghost every single night showing her that her neck had been broken and her husband had done it.
Oh my God, broken neck, lady. That's like the haunting of a Hill House.
Haunting of Hill House. Now her mother was adamant that this was correct, and so they exhumed the body of her daughter and found that in fact her neck had been broken and her windpipe had been crushed. It went to court and the man was eventually charged with her murder. So not only was this a ghost accusing someone's murder, it's the only time in American history where essentially a ghost solved their own death.
Kieran, I said this was like a soap opera. It really is. Initially, we got that theory that the noises are the ghost of William Kent's first wife, Elizabeth. Then there's that second wave of phenomenon. People think that it might be the ghost of Fanny. Either way, it is not looking good for William.
It is not looking good. And unfortunately, you've got the psychology now of all of these individuals blaming William Kent. This is so entrenched in their mind, whether it's his first wife or second wife, it doesn't matter. They've got this so entrenched in their mind, they don't want to hear any other information that would counter that idea. It's become almost like a witch hunt against William Kent.
What do we know about William?
Well, we do know that, of course, he's very young at this point. I think we forget that. He's only 21, but he comes from a very wealthy family, and he always had these big aspirations of becoming this really successful businessman. But his mother was very controlling when it came to the finances, and she would never let him have any of that money. When she died, he inherited it, and then he was able to realize his dream. But even in doing that, he was lending out money to individuals that were not paying it back. So there was a lot of conflict going on there as well.
Evelyn, we often talk about a focus in a poltergeist haunting, a particular person that the activity seems to revolve around. And it's often a teenager or a young person in many cases. Here it seems to be Betty.
Yeah, it does. And so when we look at cases we've talked about previously, such as the Battersea poltergeist, we had a young girl, Shirley, at the focus for it. Most people will be familiar with the Enfield haunting case, which seemed to focus mostly around Janet Hodgson, and of course they're both two young people. So is there a reason for why particularly poltergeist phenomena hones in on these people? Or is it that they themselves are generating the phenomena, either by artificially creating it, tricking people into it, or does it go back to this belief that because young people are turbulent, they're quite emotionally unstable, and they're going through challenging periods in their life, that they're actually generating supernatural phenomena somehow?
One other thing that we should talk about, easy to overlook, is that we're talking about this as a potential poltergeist haunting, but we've got that apparition as well that friend of Richard Parson sees.
Yeah, so the weird thing with this is that that's not typical of poltergeist cases. Full body apparitions are quite rare and they don't really fit in with poltergeist phenomena. But it does give us a different dimension, because hearing noises is one thing, apparent communication is also one thing. However, when they see this full apparition, Betty is accounted for. So if we're starting to suspect that Betty is at the heart of it, she either has help or she is not the ghost, because she can't be in two places at once.
Kieran, what did you make of that moment?
Yeah, it's a very odd moment. And what's particularly odd about it is that Betty stops people trying to follow the apparition. And I think that's a very odd thing to do.
Is that a red flag?
It is a red flag for me. And it kind of follows on from what Evelyn's saying, that potentially it's not Betty that's the actual ghost, but it's somebody else that she's in cahoots with. But also let's bear in mind that the idea of a ghost that's described as having a bed sheet is not unusual for this particular point in history. We do have many, many other cases where individuals are playing pranks, or where, burglars are covering themselves in a bedsheet to pretend to be a ghost.
This raises something really interesting, doesn't it? We talk about all of these stories as detective cases, and we look for suspects, and that could be environmental factors or psychological factors, but it can also be actual human beings as well, can't it? And we've got to look at some of the people in this case. Richard Parsons, the landlord potentially, but also this guy John Moore as well, the Methodist clergyman who comes into the house. He's almost like a kind of Georgian Ghostbuster. Are these people important here?
Yes, I think they are. They create that psychological environment, for support that there is something supernatural going on. I mean, I love the character of John Moore. He is genuinely an 18th century Ghostbuster, and he's absolutely fascinating. But bear in mind, he has a very, very strong belief in this concept of the invisible world, almost like an ethereal plane where the spirit of the wronged would wander, almost seeking retribution. So, he's very much invested in this being true. So we've got to think about him. But also then there's Richard Parsons as well. He's third generation living in that area of London, so he's very familiar with that area. But he's also living in London at a time where there is the gin craze, where lots of people are becoming addicted to gin, and Richard Parsons is one of them. He is a man who is a drinker, but also because of him excessively drinking, he's trying to feed that habit. So he's somebody that is having difficulty with finances, and all of these different layers build up a fascinating picture of psychology for me.
And we know that he owed William Kent money.
Exactly, and now we've got a reason for that, but it potentially creates it's almost like the Usual Suspects film. You've got a number of different individuals in a police lineup, and each of them have a potential reason for causing this haunting.
The plot is thicker than Greek yogurt. Keep those theories, questions and comments coming in. But right now, let's get back to Georgian London, because by mid-January 1762, the haunting is the talk of London. People are writing about it in national newspapers. They have even given the ghost a catchy nickname: Scratching Fanny. No laughing, please. Number 20 Cock Lane becomes something of a paranormal tourist destination. Fashionable, wealthy Londoners are now coming and trying to hear the ghost for themselves. One of them is Dr. Samuel Johnson, the writer of the first ever English dictionary. Soon, there are crowds outside the house blocking the street, and Richard Parsons, the landlord, the owner of number 20, is actually charging visitors to talk with the ghost. But not everybody is convinced. There are those who think that William Kent is being set up. Some skeptics wonder if all of the phenomena is faked. Someone pays a carpenter to take up the floorboards of the house to check for mechanisms that could be making the noises, but nothing is found. The finger of suspicion starts to point towards young Betty Parsons, now a teenager. Is it possible that, far from being the innocent victim of a haunting, she might be responsible for the disturbances herself? Richard Parsons publishes a notice in a newspaper offering Betty up for testing in a bid to prove the haunting is real. And people take him up on it. Betty is undressed in front of experts, watched as she sleeps. The pressure on her is intense. And then one night, another séance is held. On the 1st of February, the anniversary of Fanny's death, at the church of St. John Clerkenwell, where she is buried. The ghost seemingly promises that it will prove its existence by rapping on the lid of Fanny's coffin at precisely 1 a.m. The burial vault is full. The candles throw shadows around the stone tombs. And as the minutes tick down, all gossip is hushed until at exactly 1 a.m. Nothing is heard. Betty is in big trouble. Public opinion is beginning to turn now. More and more people feel that the haunting is a scam cooked up by her and her dad to get William Kent into trouble and make a ton of money from all the ghost hunting tourists. After 2 more seances failed to produce any results, Betty is told that unless any supernatural phenomena is observed at the next one, she and her father will face prison. The stakes could not be higher now, and incredibly, at this next séance, scratching noises are heard. Has the ghost been summoned back in the nick of time? or has Betty merely given her audience what they want? Well, Samuel Johnson, Mr. Dictionary Guy himself, declares it is the opinion of the whole assembly that the child has some art of making or counterfeiting a particular noise. So Betty is searched, and a small piece of wood is found hidden on her body. She denies knowledge of it, but if you run a fingernail over its rough surface, it produces what sounds very much like a ghostly scratch. Kieran, could this piece of wood really explain what's going on in the case? Are we looking at a carefully planned hoax?
Yeah, I think we could potentially be. I think the argument against it being a hoax would be that you're hearing sounds all over the room. You know, we've got some witnesses that say the knocking sound doesn't just come from one place, that it comes around. But we've got to bear in mind that in this environment where people are potentially a bit anxious about what's in the room or fearful of it, they could be misinterpreting where the sound comes from. But it's perfectly plausible that the knocking sound could be coming from a piece of wood.
Evelyn, it's tempting to say we've cracked the case here, but are there things that we're overlooking? Does this piece of wood explain the noises that Fanny and Betty heard? Does it explain that potential apparition seen by the friend of Richard Parsons?
Yeah, so although it explains some things, it definitely leaves a lot of holes in the story. So the visual apparition is obviously not caused by a bit of wood. I think there's a difference between scratching a small piece of wood and people hearing the noises seemingly move all over the room. Of course, people can mishear things, but it gets much more complicated when you have quite a number of people in the room. They also at one point have someone who works as a carpenter come in and check various things on the property. At one point they think it's the cobbler in the shop next door banging about late at night. That seems quite extreme for what I'm assuming is, a palm-sized bit of wood that someone is scratching a nail down. And it doesn't account for all the other phenomena. So is it a case where the phenomena is real and it's happened, but then there's a lot of pressure on Betty to produce? She's being threatened with jail. There's now people queuing up. There's people paying money. There's tenants being driven out of the property, so they're losing income. And so the noises aren't happening anymore. So she panics and she starts devising a way to create them herself. It doesn't really have to be one or the other. It doesn't have to be Betty's made up the whole thing or it's ghosts. It could be both.
This is interesting. It's something that we've seen in other cases. In the Enfield haunting case, I know people certainly talk about the idea that some phenomena was genuine, some was faked. We talked about pressure on William Kent before. The pressure on Betty is absolutely intense here.
Yeah, it is, and she's a young girl at the heart of this, and the whole thing is kind of spiralled out of control. There's this big collection of characters, there's people owed money, there's people from the church involved, it's now in the press, everyone in society is talking about it, and also there are dead people in this as well, which we forget about. There's people that she was close to, people that were her friends, essentially, people that she maybe even considered family, and they have died. So Betty's processing trauma whilst also having a tremendous amount of scrutiny on her at the same time.
Kieran, my big question to you is why? Why would Betty accuse William Kent of murder?
Yeah, I don't think we should be asking that question. I think we should be asking who is instructing Betty to do this and why. Because I think the clue lies in the fact that Richard Parsons owed William money. He owed him about 12 guineas and he didn't repay it. And William Kent instructed his solicitor to sue him and then eventually recovered the debt in January, right around the time where we start to get this phenomena happening. So you could look at it as potential revenge, but actually the reality of it is that Parsons was making money from people attending these seances. So you've got a perfect motivation for this.
And it's amazing, isn't it? Lots of people watching this will have paid to go on a ghost hunt. This is happening in Georgian London. It is such an interesting, complex case, isn't it? Thank you both. And let us know what your take is on all this. Where's your head at? Are you team believer or team skeptic? Has your mind changed since the start of the story? Things are certainly looking a bit suspicious right now, but this case is not done yet. And there is one final twist to come, because things move quickly after the discovery of that piece of wood. Betty's father, Richard Parsons, is arrested, along with the Methodist preacher, John Moore, and 3 others, including Betty's mum. The trial is a sensation. During it, people in the courtroom are briefly terrified by a loud bang before they discover it was caused by a man in the next room falling off his chair. Richard Parsons is ordered to pay William Kent a huge amount of money for destroying his reputation. The Parsons family are ruined, and over the years, the case becomes a byword for supernatural fraud. Scratching Fanny, the Cock Lane poltergeist, is a running joke, an open and shut case of deception and trickery. Or is it? Because there is a very eerie postscript to this story. In 1844, nearly 100 years after the hauntings, an artist called J.W. Archer visits the vault of St. John Clerkenwell, the church where Fanny Lyons had long ago been laid to rest in that vault where that 1 a.m. knock on her tomb never came. Archer has come here to make some sketches of the place. In his own word, he says, "I could find no better seat than one of the coffins. The sexton's boy who held my light informed me that this was the coffin of Scratching Fanny, which recalled the Cock Lane ghost to my mind." And then, Archer has a bizarre and morbid impulse. He decides to pry the lid off Fanny's coffin to see what lies inside. What he discovers is so staggering. He double-checks that he has opened the right coffin. He can hardly believe that the woman inside has been dead for nearly 100 years. Because the body of Fanny Lyons is in an excellent state of preservation, and her face shows no signs whatsoever of the ravages of smallpox. Her body has produced a substance known as adiposia, also known as corpse wax, which is what has caused this extraordinary state of preservation. It's unusual, but it's something that you see in cases where the person has been poisoned, especially with arsenic. Was the Cock Lane poltergeist, far from being the most famous supernatural hoax of its age, actually telling the truth all along? Team Believer, was Fanny really speaking from beyond the grave? Or Team Skeptic, did young Betty Parsons suspect that William Kent was a poisoner and find an ingenious way to accuse him by pretending to be Fanny's ghost? Kieran, final thoughts?
As a skeptic, I would be immediately dismissive of this case. But actually, as a forensic psychologist, I do love this case. It's psychology, it's intrigue, it's deception. So yeah, fascinated by it even to this day.
Evelyn, is this an example of it's not the dead you've got to worry about, it's the living? Or could there be something paranormal at the heart of all of this?
I think there's certainly a bit of doubt. I think even if we think we've solved the second half of the case, there's a lot of phenomena in the early stages that is completely unaccounted for. And that body at the end is really, really suspicious. So is this a case of a young girl suspected someone she knew had been murdered? She thought no one would believe her, and so she went about it in a really strange way. And perhaps the whole time that we've been looking for a ghost, we should have in fact been looking for a murderer.
It is a really powerful idea, isn't it? That bond between Betty and Fanny, and that potentially Betty did feel that William had killed Fanny and did the only thing that she knew how to. She was a young girl without a voice, and so she chose to accuse him in this way. Look, it's been such a fascinating case. I've really enjoyed sharing it with you. We've loved sharing all of these uncanny cold cases with you so far. If you've got one in mind that you think that we should investigate, we'd love to hear your ideas. Email uncanny@bbc.co.uk or find me, Danny Robbins, on social media. And also don't forget that you can watch this episode too and all the other episodes in this series so far on the brand new Uncanny YouTube channel. You can see Kieran, me and Evelyn talking and see what our faces look like. It's a beautiful thing. Next time we are going to be investigating what has to be one of the weirdest stories in British paranormal history. The Sandown Clown.
It would be arrogant of myself as a scientist to say there won't be things that we haven't discovered yet. And I think maybe that's the realm of what we're looking at here.
Why is there a 7-foot-tall clown holding its breath underwater and then coming out with 3 fingers to talk to children? Just like even saying it out loud, it sounds more and more fantastical.
Until then, sleep well. Don't have nightmares. Cold Cases was presented by me, Danny Robbins, with Evelyn Hollow and Kieran O'Keefe. Our theme tune is by Catherine Priddy. The story sections were written by Joel Morris and Will McLean, and it was produced by Simon Barnard and Victoria Lloyd. Our editor and sound designer is Charlie Brandon King, and incidental music is composed by Evelyn Sykes. This is a Bafflegab and Uncanny media production for BBC Radio 4 and BBC Sounds.
Secrets still remain.
Hello, I'm Tyler West.
And I'm Alfie Watts.
And this is The Detour, the official companion podcast to Race Across the World. This is the post-episode checkpoint where you'll hear the latest chat around each episode from us and our Race Superfan special guests. Plus, I'll be joined each week by a resident travel expert, Alfie. That's you, man.
I'll be revealing my optimal way to travel through each leg, including visits to all of those unmissable detours along the way.
And we'll also have some not seen anywhere else exclusive content at the end of every episode. I cannot wait. The Detour will land straight after each episode of Race Across the World. You can watch on iPlayer or listen on Sounds, where you'll also find extra bonus content. We'll see you then.